Hey guys, my name is Alex, and this is another reselling video focusing on books. This video is going to be a little shorter than the other ones because my girlfriend is going to be back home any minute now, and I haven't cleaned shit. But I wanted to talk about a few of the volumes that I'm going to be posting on the eBay store, and incidentally, basically what sold is the William Peter Blatty sequel to The Exorcist called Legion in hardcover. That sold for $9, and then the VHS from the Norman Mailer collection, that sold, I think, for $9. If you buy something from the eBay store, send me a message through that platform to let me know that you were brought to the store by the YouTube channel, and that way I can put a little personalized touch on the shipment. Anyways, the things I'm going to show you, that was my Bob Dylan in a library. Things I'm going to show you, really sad. Two books that I'm going to show you are two hardcover first editions, and they're both by Salman Rushdie. Both of these editions are signed, but also they're kind of not signed. They were the focus of various literary organizations in Brickell Avenue down here in Miami, and one of them has an autographed bookplate by Salman Rushdie, and it's like pasted onto the front page. So that's Joseph Anton. That's the memoir that he wrote about his years in hiding after the Ayatollah Khomeini put a fatwa on his head. The fatwa is basically like a call for execution on like holy order, because according to the Ayatollah Khomeini, Salman Rushdie's novel, The Satanic Verses, was this incendiary, blasphemous thing. He had not read the book. To the best of my knowledge, the Ayatollah was actually pretty candid about the fact that he didn't read the book. Nonetheless, he thought it was blasphemous, and so he ordered just anybody to kill Salman Rushdie. Joseph Anton is the pseudonym that he used when he was in hiding. It is a contraction of Joseph, I think, for Joseph Campbell and Anton Chekhov, his two favorite authors. And then we've got Quichotte, which is a more recent novel, I think from like 2020 or 2019. And this one also has an autographed bookplate, except the back of it has not been peeled away. It's an adhesive thing, it's a sticker, so you can stick it on this page, you can stick it on a title page, you can stick it right in the middle of the book. But another thing that I forgot to talk about at the time that it was striking me, but if you've been paying attention to what happens in the literary world, or if you just happen to be watching any platform of international news over the past 6 months, you will know that Salman Rushdie has been sort of out and about in public life for the past 15 years or so, and at the end of 2022, he was very nearly murdered. He was at a literary event, I think in upstate New York, and as if I remember correctly, he was about to give a keynote speech about the importance of freedom of speech and why writers need to stand up in public forums and sort of adhere to the principles of free thought. And I think just as he was sitting down for a Q&A, someone rushed onto the stage and stabbed him something like 50 times. So there was the attack, and it was shocking and it was horrible, and it was one of the very few news stories that like kept a cloud over my head for several days. One of the morbid things that it brings to mind is, I think, the Joseph Stalin quote about how the death of 1 or 2 or 3 people is a tragedy, but the death of thousands is a statistic. And I wonder if it's like a distinctly American thing, that you look at the news and it seems like every other week there's a mass shooting in which 8 or 12 or 30 or 50 people were murdered by a random person for random reasons. And in order to get through the day, it does harden you a little bit to news like that. But then there's an attack, a pointed attack on one very familiar face, one very familiar voice. And suddenly it's like this very dark, I don't know, validation of the Stalin quote, because now, as opposed to the standard thing of, oh, there was another mass shooting, where was the mass shooting, how many people were killed, and then we all just sort of roll our eyes about the fact that nothing is ever done about this, and we go along with our day. Whereas when Salman Rushdie was attacked, it was just, I don't know, it was so visceral. I was trying to make some sense of like why that story was hitting me so hard, staying with me, keeping a cloud over my mood, in a way that, frankly, at this point, so many dozens of mass shootings into the past decade, like, news of those mass shootings don't hit me in the same way. But also, shortly, I guess it was probably 2 weeks after Salman Rushdie was attacked, the editor-in-chief of The New Yorker, David Remnick, wrote a piece for Talk of the Town. Talk of the Town is the front section of The New Yorker where it's like 4 or 5 500-word articles, and those articles are about the more immediate things in the news, because if you're familiar with The New Yorker, they tend to do long-form journalism, stuff that takes their reporters 6 months, a year to write. You don't really go through The New Yorker in order to keep your thumb on the pulse of what happened last week. But in this front piece, David Remnick talked about how Salman Rushdie should now basically be a shoo-in for the Nobel Prize in Literature. He is now officially someone who has given more than just about any other living writer in sacrifice to the principle of free thinking, of free speech. What he was basically suggesting is that because the consequences of persevering free speech are now scarred onto Salman Rushdie's body, he is basically like a living parchment of the cost of that literary commitment to the freedom of ideas and the freedom of expression, and that is deserving of veneration and of decoration from the Nobel Committee. And that had never occurred to me before. For one thing, I totally agree with Remnick, but the idea struck me for the first time that, like, yeah, if the Nobel Prize in Literature is the highest honor for any kind of literary achievement, it does make sense that there ought to be, in some select cases, some extra literary factors that qualify a person to receive that prize. The other autographed book that I wanted to show you is Marilynne Robinson's Jack, which is, I think, the third installment in her Gilead series. It might actually be the fourth. Gilead was picked for Oprah's book club. I think it has won just about every major literary prize. It's one of my favorite books. The follow-up to that book, Lila, is very, very good. It doesn't hit me in the same way that Gilead does. I think because Gilead is kind of old school sentimental, and I am old school sentimental. But when I read Marilynne Robinson's essays, something in me starts to recoil, and it is something that I've come to realize is the recoiling of insecurity. It's the insecurity of, like, I don't understand this, I feel stupid, let me back out, because if I hit the last page, I'm gonna have to say, oh, I experienced the entire essay, and I still don't understand it. It would be way easier on my conscience and my self-esteem if I could say, yeah, it didn't make sense to me, but I didn't finish it. This copy of Jack is also autographed, but it is autographed in the more conventional way. It is autographed right there in, that's not a plate, incidentally, that is the page itself. And speaking of literary things that I don't totally understand, the last book I wanted to show you is Mark Z. Danielewski's second novel, Only Revolutions. It is a brilliantly constructed piece of work. It is 360 pages exactly. At the 180 page mark, you turn it upside down, and now you're reading the same narrative from the other character's perspective. It's topsy-turvy, twisty, twirly. I've tried to read it many times, still can't get into it, and so finally I am relinquishing my first edition hardcover, which I bought the day it came out, when I was a sophomore in high school. Mark Z. Danielewski's novel, House of Leaves, played a huge, influential role on me when I first read it, I guess at the end of college, and there are many, many Easter eggs to Mark Danielewski's work in my own debut novel, Cuba Fruit, tripping over the name because the sequel is called Cuba Tooth. My agent currently has Cuba Fruit out on submission to publishers. We will see what comes of it, but in the event that it does get published and sees the light of day, you will see many, many Easter eggs to both House of Leaves and his series, The Familiar, which I love, one of my favorite literary series of all time. And yeah, that is it in terms of books that are going on the eBay store this week. Again, if you're interested in any of these, if you'd like to check them out, there's a link to the eBay store down below. And please let me know on the eBay platform if you were brought there by this video so I can add a personal touch to the shipment. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you next time.